In 1933, a mother of 6 fed 8 people for an entire week on less than $2. No coupons. No food stamps. Just one rotating system she kept spinning in her pantry, and almost nobody talks about it anymore. They called it the pantry wheel. Not a real wheel you could touch. It was a way of thinking, a cycle of cheap staples that never let a single scrap go to waste and never let the family go hungry. Picture the house, a small kitchen, a cold cellar under the floorboards, a back porch, a garden patch out the door. Every room had a job. Every corner held part of the wheel. Nothing in that home was idle. The numbers sound impossible today. $2 a week, 8 mouths, 3 meals a day. That's around 42 meals built from almost nothing. And yet it worked in kitchen after kitchen all across the country for years. Here's the part that gets buried. The wheel wasn't about recipes. Anyone can find a cheap recipe. It was about how the whole house worked together, storage, rotation, and timing, so that money stretched further than it had any right to. Let's start where they started. The kitchen. But not the stove, the bins. Along one wall sat sacks of flour, beans, oats, and cornmeal. Bought in bulk. Bought once. Meant to last for weeks, not days. A 25-pound sack of flour could feed a family for 6 weeks. Beans by the sack cost pennies a serving. These weren't fancy foods. They were the foundation everything else turned on, the wheel's heavy center. Why bulk? Because buying small is how the poor stay poor. A little bag costs more per pound than a big one. They knew that, so they spent their few coins on the biggest sacks they could carry home. Oats deserve their own mention. One big canister could feed 2 people for a month. Not eaten every day, woven in. Breakfast porridge. A filler in meatloaf. A thickener in soup. Oats showed up everywhere, quietly doing work. Now look up to the shelf above the stove. The fat jar. Every bit of grease from cooking went in there. Bacon drippings. Meat fat. Nothing was poured down the drain. That jar was liquid gold in a lean house. That saved fat-fried the next morning's potatoes. It greased the bread pan. It flavored a pot of beans that would otherwise taste like nothing. One jar used over and over, turning bland staples into something a family looked forward to. Then there was the stock pot. On the back of the stove, almost always warm. Every vegetable peel, every bone, every leftover went into it. By the end of the week, that pot had quietly become soup for the whole table. Follow the wheel down now, beneath the floor, into the cellar. This was the cold heart of the system. No electricity, no freezer, just earth and stone holding a steady chill all year round, free of charge. Down there sat the root vegetables, potatoes, carrots, turnips, onions. Cabbages packed in sand or straw. Stored right, they kept for months without rotting. A garden harvested in fall could feed a family deep into winter. And the jars. Rows and rows of glass jars catching the light. Green beans. Tomatoes. Peaches. Pickles. A whole summer's garden sealed and shelved. When the snow came and nothing grew, the cellar still fed everyone. Here's where the wheel really starts to turn. Summer's work fed winter's table. Fall's harvest filled the cellar. Nothing was eaten in season and forgotten. Every good month paid forward into the lean ones. That was the whole secret. Think about what that means. They weren't buying food week to week, the way we do. They were drawing down a savings account of calories, one they'd filled with their own hands months before they ever got hungry. Step back, up, and out to the porch. Often shaded, always breezy. This was the in-between room. Bread pooled here. Milk sat in the coolest corner. Pots of beans soaked overnight, where the air stayed fresh and moving. The porch did something clever. It used weather instead of money. Shade for cooling. Wind for drying. Hang herbs from the rafters and they dried for free. Set apples out and they kept. No machine. No bill. Just air. Now the garden. Some would say this is where the wheel truly begins. A patch of dirt, a handful of seeds, and a little sweat. From that came beans, greens, squash, and potatoes, food that cost almost nothing to grow. These weren't hobby gardens. They were survival. People saved seeds from this year's best plants to sow next spring. The garden didn't just feed them once. It renewed itself year after year, asking only for labor in return. Let me ask you something. When did we forget all this? When did a garden become decoration instead of a pantry? Somewhere along the line, we traded the skill of feeding ourselves for the habit of buying everything. Back inside, let's watch the wheel turn through a single week. It always started with one big, cheap pot. A pound of dried beans soaked overnight, simmered slow with an onion and a spoonful of that saved fat. Monday, it was beans and rice. Tuesday, the same beans became a thick soup with a few cellar vegetables. Wednesday, mashed into patties and fried. One pot of beans, 3 different dinners, and the week was barely half done. This is the trick modern kitchens lost. We cook a meal and call it finished. They cooked once and reinvented it for days. The same food, dressed differently, so nobody at the table felt like they were eating leftovers. Bread tied it all together. Flour, water, salt, a little yeast. Baked at home, it cost a fraction of a store loaf. Fresh on Monday. Toast by Thursday. And the hard heels at the end? Those went straight into the soup. Nothing left the house as garbage. Stale bread thickened soup. Sour milk became biscuits. Bones boiled into broth, then broth into gravy. Even the water from boiled potatoes went into the next loaf of bread. Every scrap had a second life. Eggs, when they had them, were stretched too. One egg could bind a whole pan of cornbread. Beaten into a little milk, it turned dry leftovers into a custard. A single hen's worth of eggs reached across many meals. You start to see it now, don't you? It was never one magic food. It was a rhythm. Buy heavy and cheap. Store with the seasons. Cook once, eat many times. Waste nothing. Round and round, week after week. Here's what almost nobody points out. That $2 week wasn't about being poor. It was about being free. A family with a full cellar didn't fear a layoff. They didn't panic at an empty wallet. They simply ate from the wheel. Compare that to now. Most homes hold maybe 3 days of food. The power blinks, the store shelves empty, and panic sets in within hours. We've never been richer, and somehow we've never been more fragile at the dinner table. They built their security into the house itself. Not into a bank, not into a job, not into a store across town. Into the cellar under their feet and the garden out their door. Real security you could walk through and touch. And notice who was at the center of it all. The mother in the kitchen. The grandmother who knew which jar to open. This was knowledge, passed hand to hand, generation to generation. It wasn't written down. It was simply lived. That's exactly how it slipped away. When the lean years ended, the cellars emptied. Supermarkets rose. Freezers hummed. One generation simply stopped teaching the next, because nobody thought they'd ever need it again. The wheel quietly stopped turning. We were told this was progress. Why store food when the store never closes? Why can tomatoes when you can buy them in January? Convenience won. And in winning, it quietly erased a skill people once relied on to survive. The knowledge itself isn't truly gone. It's sitting in old cookbooks, in faded handwriting on recipe cards, in the memories of the oldest people we know. It's waiting, the way a seed waits in dry soil for someone to ask. And here's the quiet truth underneath it all. None of this required money. It required attention. The willingness to save a jar of fat, to soak the beans the night before, to put up in summer what you'd need in the cold. That's the part that should stop us cold. 8 people fed for under $2, not by spending more, but by paying attention. By treating food as something to steward, not something to throw away. By letting nothing go to waste. Walk through your own home tonight and ask the old question. What's in the pantry? What's in the freezer? If the store's closed for a month, how long could your family actually eat? For most of us, the answer is uncomfortable. The good news is that the wheel still turns for anyone who builds one. a sack of beans, a shelf of jars, a cool, dark corner, a few rows of vegetables. You don't need a farm. You need a little intention. They didn't have much. A hard floor, a cold cellar, a hot stove, and hands that knew what to do. From those 4 things, they built a kind of safety most of us, with all our wealth, have never once felt. So maybe the real secret was never the $2 at all. Maybe it was the wheel itself, the simple, patient idea that a home should feed the people inside it. The question is whether yours still can. And whether you remember how